Okay everybody, this little edition of the quick tips for Photographer's Lair, I'm going to cover the tone curve in Photoshop, and it's basically the same tool in Lightroom and probably a lot of other software. I know video programs like Premiere and other things have a very similar or the same type of a adjustment or filter that is available to you. And really the overall concept of what curves, the tone curve does, is to adjust the different color channels or the overall combination of those color channels of your image, both in the shadows and highlights. So we're in Photoshop here, and if you haven't ever looked at this, your channels over here basically indicate red, green, and blue, which is the RGB aspect of a typical photograph. And then you have your upper level full RGB, which is the entire combination. And so if you take any one of these out, obviously you get a very oddly colored image. But for example, if you select one of them individually, it actually shows you just a black and white image, but that's all the information, for example, that is available on just the green channel. So what Curves is doing is basically adjusting those channels as you move this curve up or down. And you can see right now, if you are looking at this, you have the same channels here, red, green, and blue, available to you. And anytime you click and add a point on this curve, you can see it's adjusting through the tonal range of the image. And looking at this, it's similar to what I posted in the histogram earlier, is that your shadows are on the left and your highlights are on the right, and each of these different areas is affecting that tonal range. There's a number of different ways you can look at this, and this little tool right here basically lets you pick a point in the image, and then it will adjust that tonal area as you slide up and down in the image. And you can really get crazy with this, but if there's something specific that you think, well, maybe I want to bring the shadows up a little bit, you can click in here in the shadows and do something like that. And I'm just clicking and dragging those points away to get rid of them. Another really neat little tip that I've learned with working with this is to create a black and white grayscale gradient across the bottom to help you really visualize how different adjustments are impacting your image. And I've got those really quick. I created those here like this, and I'll show you how I do that. So let's just get rid of all this. The first thing, if you just have your background image here, is to just grab your rectangular selection tool and create a selection across the bottom of the image. And then you come down here to your different adjustments and select the gradient. Now this, depending on if you've done anything with it before, will bring up something strange like this, but you want to change this angle of rotation to 0 so it's going across from dark to light, and then just pick the black to white preset. Okay? And that's great, but if you want to break it into just individual boxes, you want to do a posterize adjustment to it, and you can see right off the bat that's affecting the entire I clicked the wrong one. Posterize, that's this one. There we go. And you can just clip that to just the gradient by clicking this button here, or doing an Alt or Option on the Mac, click in between the two layers. So that adjusts it so that this posterize is affecting only the gradient and turning it into these separate individual gray and black and white boxes. Now I typically like to have this at either 7 or 9 just to give you a good range of tones, and keeping it an odd number will keep you with a 50% gray here in the middle. So something like that works nicely. And then if you go to your tone curve, you can say, okay, if I want to bring the shadows up, for instance, and do the matte finish kind of thing where you are, crushing down that black to make it more of just a hazy gray, you can just sit here with this option selected and click and drag up and down on that black to create that effect. And same thing if you are maybe a little bit too bright in the midtones or upper midtones, you can bring that down here, and it won't let you actually take the highlights this way, which is somewhat interesting, but you can do the opposite. Okay, so this just helps you kind of see what's going on. Now if you start playing with the individual channels, for instance, if you add red by sliding the midtone up, you're basically making the image more red throughout the range. Or if you go the opposite direction, you get the opposite of red, which is this teal image color. Same thing with green. You make it more green or more magenta, and blue is more blue or more yellow. Okay. So really, when you're dealing with this from an editing standpoint, you can do a lot of nice things. Say, for instance, you think, okay, everything looks good, maybe there's a little bit of too much red in his skin tone up there, and you want to be gentle with these kinds of adjustments, because going too far can show up really quickly as a strange color cast. So if you bring that way down, you're turning everything this teal kind of color, but just a little bit, and then you can come back over here to the shadows and bump that back up. And then if you want to get really crazy and do some kind of cross-processing thing, you can do things with the green and blue channels to really create these different kind of filtered photo effects that you see in a lot of different actions and presets that you can get from different companies. So that's really what the tone curve is all about, letting you individually adjust areas of your image within all the red, blue, and green tones, as well as your overall RGB, which just affects the entire range of the image. And it gives you the preview of your histogram down here as well. So that's pretty much what I wanted to show you with the tone curves. Now the other thing is, so an image like this, which is really a primarily dark image, if you can see here, if you look at the histogram that's displayed here, all the information is in the shadows and just a little bit here in the highlight areas. So as you adjust this, the majority of any impact is going to come from adjusting things in the shadow area versus the highlights. There's not a whole lot going on there. But again, sometimes it's fun to really play with some of this cross-processing kind of effect, and just very subtly add some different colors and tones into your shadows and highlight areas. Okay. So again, this is kind of the power of using that curve tool, and within Photoshop you can then say, okay, I like it, but maybe it's a little too intense. Just bring down the opacity until it kind of registers how you want it to look. Same thing with this other image here. Let me turn off that gradient so you see exactly how the whole image looks, and say, Yeah, it looks nice. I probably went too far with all that, so let's just push it to about there. Okay. And just to show you, in Lightroom, it's the same exact kind of tool, although there's an option here in Lightroom to stop editing as a point, and it'll automatically break it into 4 zones: shadows, darks, lights, and highlights. And you can just use the sliders to do basically the same kind of thing. And I've got my highlight alert set here, so it's showing me what's blown out. Now, this one, when you have it set to that option, doesn't let you do the individual RGB channels. So I usually leave it as the curves, and then you have those options right here. And as well as the ability to do what I was showing. Yeah, too many points. Delete control point, delete control point. So as you bring this up, you're basically doing that same thing that I was just showing you in Photoshop, where it's bringing this histogram up from the full black. And then you say, okay, maybe do the same thing with reds, and a little bit of red out of the highlights. Bring it back up there. So it's one of those things you just kind of play with and adjust things to what looks good for you, depending on the image you're working with and the creative effects you're trying to get. It's really a pretty slick tool, and one of the most powerful things that's available for editing any image. Sorry about my phone going crazy. So let me know if you have any questions again, and I'll see you again next time.